Good day, everyone. I am Rosicler Plaza Avila, and I will be talking about Sullivan interpersonal theory. So, the content of our report would be the background of Sullivan, kinds of tensions, anxiety, energy transformations, kinds of dynamisms, types of personifications, levels of cognitions, stages of development, psychological disorders and psychotherapy, the pros and cons of charms for girls and boys, the help of having an imaginary friend, Sullivan's concept of humanity. So, who is Sullivan? Sullivan was born in the small farming town of Norwich, New York, in February 21, 1892. He had no friends in his young days because of his Irish birth and quick mind, but he had these imaginary friends. His mother, Ella Sullivan, was 32 when she married Timothy Sullivan and 39 when Harry was born. She got two another sons, but was died after their first year. As the only living son of the couple, Sullivan was being pampered and protected by his mother. Later on, at his 8.5 age, he met this boy named Clarence Ballinger, who have the same situation and personality as him. Most scholars believe that the two boys were homosexual since they had an intimate relationship. Sullivan graduated as valedictorian at the age of 16, and then he entered Cornell University to become a physicist, but his performance at the school is a disaster and even got a suspension for 1 year, but not solely because of his academic deficiencies. Then Sullivan entered Chicago College of Medicine and Surgery and finished his medical studies in 1915, but did not receive a degree until 1917. Sullivan said that the delay was because he had not yet paid the tuition, but some scholars get evidence that the delay was because of his unfinished requirements. Later on, Sullivan spent his time and energy at Shepherd selecting and training hospital attendants and earned the position because he developed a system for schizophrenic patients through giving them respect and care. March 1930, he resigned from Shepherd. Later that year, he moved to New York City and opened a private practice, hoping to enlarge his understanding of interpersonal relations by investigating non-schizophrenic disorders. His residence in New York gave him an opportunity to meet several psychiatrists and social sciences. Among these were Karen Horney, H. Fromm, Freda Fromm Richman, and many more. They formed an informal organization named Zodiac Group, where they talk about old and new ideas about psychiatry and related social sciences over a cup of drinks. Along with his residency in New York, Sullivan also came under the influence of several noted social scientists from University of Chicago, which was the center of American sociological study during the 1920s and 1930s. Included among them were social psychologist George Herbert Mead, sociologist Robert Ezra Park, and W. I. Thomas, anthropologist Edward Sapir, and political science Harold Laswell. Sullivan, Sapir, and Laswell were primarily responsible for establishing the William Alanson White Psychiatry Foundation in Washington, D.C., for the purpose of joining psychiatry to the other social sciences. Sullivan served as the first president of the foundation and also as editor of the foundation's journal Psychiatry. Under the guidance of Sullivan, the foundation began a training institution known as the Washington School of Psychiatry. Because of these activities, Sullivan gave up his New York practice, which was not very lucrative anyway, and moved back to Washington, D.C., where he remained closely associated with the school and the journal. In January 1949, Sullivan attended a meeting of the World Federation for Mental Health in Amsterdam. While on his way home, January 14, 1949, he died on a cerebral hemorrhage in a Paris room, a few weeks short of his 57th birthday. Non-uncharacteristically, he was alone at the time. On the personal side, Sullivan was not comfortable with his sexuality and had ambivalent feelings towards marriage. As an adult, he brought into his home a 15-year-old boy who was probably a former patient. This young man named James Ensko remained with Sullivan for 22 years, looking after his financial affairs, typing manuscripts, and generally running the household. Although Sullivan never officially adopted Jimmy, he regarded him as a son and even had his legal name changed to James I. Sullivan. Sullivan also had an ambivalent attitude towards religion. Born to Catholic parents who attended church only irregularly, he abandoned Catholicism early on. In later life, his friends and acquaintances regarded him as non-religious or even anti-Catholic, but to their surprise, Sullivan had written into his will a request to receive a Catholic burial. Incidentally, this request was granted despite the fact that Sullivan's body had been cremated in Paris. His ashes were returned to the United States, where they were placed in a coffin and received a full Catholic burial, complete with a requiem mass. So our first topic would be the tensions. Personality is seen as an energy by Freud, Jung, and Sullivan. Energy can either be a tension, a possible or future action, or an action itself, which result to energy transformations. Energy transformations develop the tension into an overt, which is an action that can be seen by other people, like running or being sad, and a covert, which is through the use of the mind, that is hidden from other people, like thinking of or dreaming. These two aim to satisfy the needs or reduce the anxiety of a person. Tensions also are unconsciously felt, like anxiety, hunger, and drowsiness. It is felt but you don't have a control over it. Sullivan recognized the two types of tensions, which is the needs and anxiety. So what is the needs? Needs is a common factor of a person. It can be inside, which is the interpersonal, like love, care, or the outside, which is the zonal needs, like air, water, food, and shelter. Once the needs are being satisfied, you will stop looking for it, but it can reoccur at the same time. Tenderness is a general need because it is concerned with the overall well-being of a person, just like the zonal needs or the physiological needs. So an example would be an infant's need to receive tenderness may be expressed as a cry, smile, or cuckoo, whereas the mother's need to give tenderness may be transformed into touching, fondling, or holding the baby. In this example, the need for tenderness is satisfied through the use of the infant's mouth and the mother's hands. So the next one would be the anxiety. It is the kind of tension which is not clear or disjunctive. Anxiety can be transferred from the parent to the infant through empathy. For example, a mother may feed her anxious crying baby because she mistakes anxiety for hunger. If the baby hesitates in accepting the milk, the mother may become more anxious herself, which generates additional anxiety within the infant. Finally, the baby's anxiety reaches a level at which it interferes with sucking and swallowing. Anxiety then operates in opposition to tensions of needs and prevents them from being satisfied. Anxiety has a deleterious effect on adults too. It is the chief disruptive force blocking the development of healthy interpersonal relations. It makes people incapable of learning, impairs memory, narrows perception, and may result in complete amnesia. Anxiety prevents people from learning from their mistakes, keeping people pursuing a childish wish for security, and generally ensure that people will not learn from their experience. Sullivan stated that the presence of anxiety is much worse than its absence. Anxiety usually stems from complex interpersonal situations and is only vaguely represented in awareness. Anxiety has no positive value. Lastly, anxiety blocks the satisfaction of needs. The next one would be the energy transformations. It is tensions that are transformed into actions. It is aimed at satisfying needs and reducing anxiety. Not all energy transformations are obvious, overt actions that takes the form of emotions and thoughts or covert behaviors that can be hidden from other people. Dynamisms. It is the same as traits or habit patterns that will characterize a person depending on his or her projected behavior. Dynamisms are of two major classes.
First, those related to specific zones of the body, including the mouth, anus, and genitals. And second, those related to tensions. Disjunctive dynamisms. Malevolence is the practice of wishing evil in others or hatred towards one's enemies. Example is when parents present a physical pain or provoking remarks to a child, it is possible that the child will develop malevolent attitude to protect himself or herself, which affects the child interaction with his or her parents or peers. Sullivan expressed the malevolent attitude with this colorful statement: "Once upon a time everything was lovely, but that was before I had to deal with people." Because Sullivan, as a young boy, distanced himself from his peers because of discrimination. Isolating dynamisms. Lust is a self-centered need that can be satisfied in the absence of an intimate interpersonal relationship. It is requiring no other person for its satisfaction. Example of lust is what you might feel when you see a really attractive person of the opposite sex without having an intimate relationship towards him or her.
Conjunctive dynamisms, or intimacy. It involves a close interpersonal relationship between two people who are more or less of equal status. Intimacy must not be confused with sexual interest, because intimacy is closeness or a close familiarity towards a person, while sexual interest is an emotion and motivational state characterized by an interest in sexual objects or activities. Intimacy helps us avoid anxiety and loneliness. It is a rewarding experience that most healthy people desire, like being emotionally connected and supported to the other person. So the last one would be the conjunctive dynamisms also, or the self-system. Sullivan believed that self-system will reduce the tension of anxiety to the person. As the child grows up, he or she will be able to learn which behavior are related to an increase or decrease in anxiety. This ability to detect slight increases or decreases in anxiety provides the self-system with a built-in warning device. The warning, however, is a mixed blessing. It will serve as a signal that the person can protect himself or herself from any occurring anxiety, but on the other hand, it will serve as a self-system resistant that will stop the person from gaining or profiting anxiety-filled experiences, while threatens their security and attempt to defend themselves by the means of security operations. Two important security operations are dissociation and selective inattention. Dissociation includes those impulses, desires, and needs that a person refuses to allow into awareness, like daydreaming or getting lost into a book or movie. Selective inattention, on the other hand, is a refusal to see those things that we do not wish to see, like you don't want to see a particular person for some reasons. The next one would be the personifications. Beginning in infancy and continuing throughout the various development stages, people acquire certain images of themselves and others. These images, called personifications, they may be relatively accurate, or because they are colored by people's needs and anxieties, they may be grossly distorted. The first personification would be the bad mother, good mother personification. The bad mother personification grows out of the infant's experiences with the bad nipple. That is the nipple that does not satisfy the hunger of the baby. Whether the nipple belongs to the mother or to a bottle held by the mother, the father, a nurse, or anyone else is not important. It is not an accurate image of the real mother, but merely the infant's vague representation of not being properly fed. A good mother personification is based on the tender and cooperative behaviors of the mothering one. These two personifications, one based on the infant's perception of an anxious, malevolent mother, and the other based on calm, tender mother. These personifications will be based on how the mother portrays herself to the child. The next one is the me personifications. During mid-infancy, a child acquires three me personifications: the bad me, the good me, and the not me, that form the building blocks of the self-personification. The bad me personification is acquired from experiences of punishments and disapproval that infants receive from their mothering one, like battering, which the child can acquire and act violent in school or bully someone. The good me personification results from infants' experiences with the reward and approval of their mother. Infants feel good about themselves when they perceive their mother's expressions of tenderness. The last one would be the not me personification. An infant denies these experiences to the me image so that they become part of the not me personification. It is an experiences evoking like anxiety or horror that may lead to nightmares or schizophrenic reactions. The next one would be the eidetic personifications. It is an unrealistic traits or imaginary friends that many children invent in order to protect their self-esteem. Sullivan believed that these imaginary friends may be as significant to a child's development as real playmates as he has one in his younger days. Eidetic personifications can create conflict in interpersonal relations when two people project onto others imaginary traits that are remnants from previous relationships. They also hinder communication and prevent people from functioning on the same level of cognition. So the next topic would be the three levels of cognitions, which is the prototasic, paratasic, and syntasic. It is the way of perceiving, imagining, and conceiving. So what is prototasic level? These experiences cannot be communicated to others. They are difficult to describe or define. Example is a newborn baby wherein a child feels hunger and pain, which can result to sulking and crying of the baby. The infant does not know the reason for the actions and sees no relationship between these actions and being fed that makes the baby unconscious. In adults, it is the momentary sensations, images, feelings, moods, and impressions. An example would be is when an adult cannot put into words the sensations that they felt. The next one is the paratasic level. It is pre-logical and usually results when a person assumes a cause and effect relationship between two events that occur coincidentally. It is not the same as the prototasic level, but both their meaning remains private. An example is when a child wants a specific thing or food in a countless time and continuously says please. It will result to a cane disappearance, but it isn't just solely because of the word please. A dispensing person must be present who hears the word and willing to honor the request. When no such person is present, a child may ask God or imaginary people to grant favors. The last one would be the syntactic level. It is a consensually validated experience that two or more persons agreed upon. The best example would be the language and gestures because it is used by one person to communicate to other which they they agreed and understood the meanings. For instance, the mother and baby understood the gestures and sound the other person is pertaining because they knew the meaning. The next topic is the stages of development. Sullivan suggested 7 stages of development, each crucial to the formation of human personality. Personality change can take place at any time, likely to occur during the transition from one stage to the next. Sullivan hypothesized that as one passes over one of these more or less determinable thresholds, a development era, everything that has gone before becomes reasonably open to influence. His 7 stages are infancy, childhood, the juvenile era, pre-adolescence, early adolescence, late adolescence, and adulthood. So, infancy. It starts at birth and continues until a child develops a syntactic level of cognition, usually at 18 to 24 months old. Sullivan believed that a baby becomes human through the tenderness of the mother or a cooperation from another person that will provide food, shelter, moderate temperature, physical contact, and the cleansing of waste materials. The anxiety of the baby is because of the empathic connection between the child and the mother, which is impossible to stop or prevent. Whenever infants feel anxious, a condition originally transmitted to it by the mother, they try whatever means available to reduce anxiety. It includes rejecting the nipple, but this neither reduces anxiety nor satisfies the need for the food. An infant's rejection of the nipple, of course, is not responsible for the mother's original anxiety but now adds to it. An infant expresses both anxiety and hunger through crying. The mother one may mistake anxiety for hunger and force the nipple onto an anxious but not hungry infant. The baby may even stop breathing and turn a bluish color, but the built-in protections of apathy and somnolent detachment keep the infant from death. Apathy and somnolent detachment allow the infant to fall asleep despite the hunger. In the beginning, their language is not consensually validated but takes place on an individualized or parastastic level. This period of infancy is characterized by autistic language, that is private language that makes little or no sense to other people. Early communication takes place in the form of facial expressions and the sounding of various phonemes. Both are learned through imitation, and eventually gestures and speech sounds have the same meaning for the infant as they do for other people. The next one would be the childhood. The era of childhood begins with the advent of syntactic language and continues until the appearance of the need for playmates of an equal status. The age of childhood varies from culture to culture and from individual to individual. During this stage, the mother remains the most significant other person, but her role is different from what it was in infancy. During childhood, emotions become reciprocal. A child is able to give tenderness as well as receive it. The relationship between mother and child becomes more personal and less one-sided. Rather than seeing the mother as good or bad based on how she satisfied hunger needs, the child evaluates the mother syntactically according to whether she chose reciprocal tender feelings, develops a relationship based on the mutual satisfaction of needs, or exhibits a rejecting attitude. Besides their parents, preschool-aged children often have one other significant relationship, an imaginary playmate. This eidetic friend enables children to have a safe, secure relationship that produces little anxiety. Parents sometimes observe their preschool-aged children talking to an imaginary friend, calling the friend by name, and possibly even insisting that an extra place be set at the table or place be made available in the car or the bed for this playmate. Sullivan insisted that having an imaginary playmate is not a sign of instability or pathology. but a positive event that helps children become ready for intimacy with real friends during the adolescent stage. These playmates offer children an opportunity to interact with another person who is safe and who will not increase their level of anxiety. Sullivan referred to childhood as a period of rapid acculturation wherein a child will learn about his or her environment. They also learn two other important processes, which is the dramatizations and preoccupations. Dramatizations are attempts to act like or sound like significant authority figures, especially mother and father. Preoccupations are strategies for avoiding anxiety and fear-provoking situations by remaining occupied with an activity that has earlier proved useful or rewarding. The next stage would be the juvenile era. The juvenile era begins with the appearance of the need for peers or playmates of equal status and ends when one finds a single chum to satisfy the need for intimacy. Remember that Sullivan was 8.5 when he began an intimate relationship with the 13-year-old boy from a nearby farm named Clarence Ballinger. During the juvenile stage, Sullivan believed a child should learn to compete, compromise, and cooperate. The degree of competition found among children of this age varies with the culture. Many children believe that they must be competitive to be successful. Compromise too can be overdone. A 7-year-old child who learns to continually give in to others is handicapped in the socialization process, and this yielding trait may continue to characterize the person in later life. Cooperation includes all those processes necessary to get along with others. The juvenile age child must learn to cooperate with others in the real world of interpersonal relationships. Cooperation is a critical step in becoming socialized and is the most important task confronting children during this stage of development. By the end of the juvenile stage, a child should have developed an orientation toward living that makes it easier to consistently handle anxiety, satisfy zonal and tenderness needs, and set goals based on memory and foresight. The orientation toward living readies a person for the deeper interpersonal relationships to follow. The next is the pre-adolescence. It begins at the age 8.5 and ends with adolescence. It's a time for intimacy with one particular person, usually a person of the same gender. A pre-adolescence for the first time takes a genuine interest in the other person. Sullivan called this process of becoming a social being the quiet miracle of pre-adolescence, a likely reference to the personality transformation he experienced during his own pre-adolescence. The outstanding characteristic of pre-adolescence is the genesis of the capacity to love. Previously, all interpersonal relationships were based on personal need satisfaction, but during pre-adolescence, intimacy and love become the essence of friendships. Intimacy involves a relationship in which the two partners consensually validate one another's personal worth. Love exists when the satisfaction or the security of another person becomes as significant to one as is one's own satisfaction or security. Chums are able to freely express opinions and emotions to one another without fear of humiliation or embarrassments. Sullivan believed that pre-adolescence is the most untroubled and carefree time of life. Parents are still significant even though they have been reappraised in a more realistic light. Pre-adolescents can experience unselfish love that has not yet been complicated by lust. Early adolescence begins with puberty and ends with the need for sexual love with one person. It is marked by the eruption of genital interest and the advent of lustful relationships. The need for intimacy achieved during the preceding stage continues during early adolescence but is now accompanied by a parallel but separated need or lust. In addition, security or the need to be free from anxiety remains active during early adolescence. Thus, intimacy, lust, and security often collide with one another, bringing stress and conflict to the young adolescents in at least three ways. First, lust interferes with security operations because genital activity in American culture is frequently ingrained with anxiety, guilt, and embarrassment. Second, intimacy also can threaten security, as when young adolescents seek intimate friendships with one-gender adolescents. These attempts are fraught with self-doubt, uncertainty, and ridicule from others, which may lead to loss of self-esteem and an increase in anxiety. Third, intimacy and lust are frequently in conflict during early adolescence. Therefore, young adolescents may retain their intimate friendship from adolescents while feeling lust for people they neither like nor even know. A boy with no previous experience with intimacy may see a girl as sex objects, while having no real interest in them. An early adolescent girl may sexually tease boys but lack the ability to relate to them on an intimate level. Sullivan believed that early adolescence is a turning point in personality development. The person either emerges from this stage in command of the intimacy and lust dynamisms or faces serious interpersonal difficulties during future stages. Although sexual adjustment is important to personality development, Sullivan felt that the real issue lies in getting along with other people. The next one is the late adolescence. Late adolescence begins when young people are able to feel both lust and intimacy toward the same person, and it ends in adulthood when they establish a lasting love relationship. Successful late adolescence includes a growing synthetic mood. At college or in the workplace, late adolescents begin exchanging ideas with others and having their opinions and beliefs either validated or repudiated. They learn from others how to live in the adult world, but a successful journey through the earlier stages facilitates the adjustment. Previous developmental epochs were unsuccessful, young people come to late adolescence with no intimate interpersonal relations, inconsistent pattern of sexual activity, and a great need to maintain security operations. They face serious problems in bridging the gulf between society's expectations and their own inability to form intimate relations with persons of the other gender. Believing that love is a universal condition of young people, they are often pressured into falling in love. However, only the mature person has the capacity to love. Others merely go through the motions of being in love in order to maintain security. Adulthood. The successful completion of late adolescence culminates in adulthood, a period when people can establish a love relationship with at least one significant other person. Writing of this love relationship, Sullivan stated that this really highly developed intimacy with another is not the principal business of life, but is perhaps the principal source of satisfaction in life. He believed that mature adulthood was beyond the scope of interpersonal psychiatry. People who have achieved the capacity to love are not in need of psychiatric counsel. Mature adults are perceptive of other people's anxiety, needs, and security. They operate predominantly on the synthetic level and find life interesting and exciting. The next is a summary of the stages of development that can help us for better understanding. We can see here that the development of every stage from infancy to late adolescence that ends up on 15 years old. So what is psychological disorders? Sullivan believed that all psychological disorders have an interpersonal origin and can be understood only with reference to the patient's social environment. Sullivan insisted that everyone is much more simply human than unique, and that no matter what ails the patient, he is mostly a person like the psychiatrist. Most Sullivan's early therapeutic work was with schizophrenic patients, and many of his subsequent lectures and writings dealt with schizophrenia. Sullivan distinguished two broad classes of schizophrenia: The first included all those symptoms that originate from organic causes or a patient with mental health issue. Example would be a person with delusions and are thereof beyond the study of interpersonal psychiatry. The second class included all schizophrenic disorders grounded in situational factors. Example would be is when the person may neglect personal hygiene. Dissociated reactions, which often precede schizophrenia, are characterized by loneliness, low self-esteem, the uncanny emotion, unsatisfactory relations with others, and ever-increasing anxiety. People with a dissociated personality, in common with all people, attempt to minimize anxiety by building an elaborate self-system that blocks out those experiences that threaten their security. The next one would be the psychotherapy. Sullivan based his therapeutic procedures on an effort to improve a patient's relationship with others. To facilitate this process, the therapist serves as a participant observer, becoming part of an interpersonal, face-to-face relationship with the patient and providing the patient an opportunity to establish synthetic communication with another human being. Sullivanian therapy is aimed at uncovering patients' difficulties in relating to others. To accomplish this goal, the therapist helps patients to give up some security in dealing with other people and to realize that they can achieve mental health only through consensually validated personal relations. To accomplish this goal, the therapist helps patients to give up some security in dealing with other people and to realize that they can achieve mental health only through consensually validated personal relations. The therapeutic ingredient in this process is the face-to-face relationship between the therapist and the patients, which permits patients to reduce anxiety and to communicate with others on the syntactic level. Sullivanian therapists avoid getting personally involved. They do not place themselves on the same level with the patient. On the contrary, they try to convince the patient of their expert abilities. In other words, friendship is not a condition of psychotherapy. Therapists must be trained as experts in the difficult business of making discerning observations of the patient's interpersonal relations. Sullivan was primarily concerned with understanding patients and helping them improve foresight. Sullivan was primarily concerned with understanding patients and helping them improve foresight, discover difficulties in interpersonal relations, and restore their ability to participate in consensually validated experiences. Pros and cons of charms for girls and boys. Sullivan considered friends during childhood and adolescence to be crucial to developing into a healthy adult. Friends are a source of social support, and it is comforting to lean on them when times are tough or when you're having a bad day. Friends may be particularly important during childhood because children do not have the same advanced coping mechanisms that adults have and sometimes struggle to deal with issues like being rejected by a peer. In situations like this, it is important to have a friend or a chum. But recently, psychologists have begun investigating the potentially harmful aspects of social support in childhood. It may seem counterintuitive to suggest that having friends can be a bad thing, but sometimes the dynamics of a particular friendship can actually be damaging. Rumination is one such dynamic that can have a negative impact of children's well-being. Ruminating is the act of dwelling on a negative event or negative aspects of an otherwise neutral or even positive event and is generally considered to be harmful as it is associated with an increase in depression. When rumination occurs in the context of a friendship, it is called co-rumination, which is defined as excessively discussing personal problems within a relationship. Co-rumination in same-sex friendships was related to increased feelings of depression and anxiety but was also related to greater friendship quality. In other words, although co-rumination did increase negative feelings, it was not all negative because it was also a sign of a good friendship. This makes sense because constantly dwelling on negative events will understandably lead one to feel more depressed. But disclosing your feelings to friends can make you feel closer to that person and generally improve the relationship. Rose and colleagues looked for sex differences in the effects of co-rumination on depression, anxiety, and overall depression quality. But what they found was quite interesting because co-rumination was particularly bad for girls but not so bad for boys. Co-rumination was associated with increased depression and anxiety but also with better friendships. For boys, however, co-rumination was associated with better friendships but was not related to increased depression or anxiety. Amanda's Rose research shows that for boys, having a supportive friend may well be sufficient to ward off depression or anxiety. For girls, however, the research paints a different picture. If girls are engaging in co-rumination with their friends, then no matter how supportive those friends are and no matter how good the friends is, girls are at increased risk for developing depression. So imaginary friends. Sullivan believed that these friendships can facilitate independence from parents and help children build real relationships. Evidence supports Sullivan's theory that children who develop imaginary friends, in contrast to those who do not, are more creative, imaginary, intelligent, friendly, and sociable. Of course, it's hard to get by on imaginary friends alone, but there is some evidence that suggests imaginary friends are just as important as real friends, at least in the eyes of the children. To explore how children view imaginary friends in relation to their real friends, Tracy Gleason and Lisa Human in 2006 conducted a study in preschool-aged children. The researchers had 84 children enrolled in Preschool Complete, an activity in which they listed who their friends were at preschool, described their imaginary friend if they had one, and rated each friend, including the imaginary ones, on several dimensions. Specifically, the children rated how much they liked playing with each friend, whether they told secrets to one another, how much they liked each friend in general, and how good each friend made them feel about their own abilities. Of course, because the participants in the study were young children, they could not respond to a standard self-report measure. Instead, the questions were read aloud to each child, and the questions were carefully worded to use language that preschoolers could easily understand. Additionally, because children can get confused easily, their responses had to be corroborated by their parents and preschool teachers. What Gleason and Hoffman in 2006 found was generally supportive of Sullivan's notion that imaginary friends are important and help to model how real friendships should work. 26% of the preschoolers sampled reported having an imaginary friend and that their imaginary friend was a source of real support and one of their highest rated sources of enjoyment. The researchers were also able to compare children's ratings of imaginary friends with those of their real friends and found that imaginary friends very closely modeled the enjoyment derived from reciprocal friendships but not that derived from friendships that they were essentially one way. That is, relationships with imaginary friends were enjoyable at about the same level as those friendships in which both children describes each other as friends, a reciprocal friendship, but not in which one child says the other is a friend but that the other does not reciprocate, which is the one-way friendships. In summary, research tends to support Sullivan's assumptions that having an imaginary playmate is a normal, healthy experience. It is neither a sign of pathology nor a result of feelings of loneliness and alienation from other children. Indeed, imaginary friends not only may serve as a source of enjoyment, but also may have the more important purpose of modeling for children what a truly good, mutually enjoyable friendship should be so that they can avoid bad relationships as they grow and mature into healthy adults. The last topic is Sullivan's concept of humanity. The once influence separating humans from all other creatures is interpersonal relations. People are born biological organisms. Animals with no human qualities except the potential for participation in interpersonal relations. Soon after birth, they begin to realize their potential when interpersonal experience transforms them into human beings. Sullivan believed that the mind contains nothing except what was put there through interpersonal experiences. People are not motivated by instincts but by those environmental influences that come through interpersonal relationships. Children begin life with a somewhat one-sided relationship with a mothering one who both cares for their needs and increases their anxiety. Later, they become able to reciprocate feelings for the mothering one, and this relationship between child and parent serves as a foundation on which subsequent interpersonal relations are built. At about the time children enter the first grade at school, they are exposed to competition, cooperation, and compromise with other children. If they handle these tasks successfully, they obtain the tools necessary for intimacy and love that come later. Through their intimate and love relationships, they become healthy personalities. However, an absence of healthy interpersonal relationships leads to stunted psychological growth. Personal individuality is an illusion. People exist only in relation to other people and have as many personalities as they have interpersonal relations. Thus, the concepts of uniqueness and individuality are of little concern to Sullivan's interpersonal theory. Anxiety and interpersonal relations are tied together in a cyclic manner, which makes significant personality changes difficult. Anxiety interferes with interpersonal relations, and unsatisfactory interpersonal relations lead to the use of rigid behaviors that may temporarily buffer anxiety. But because these inflexible behaviors do not solve the basic problem, they eventually lead to higher levels of anxiety, which lead to further deterioration in interpersonal relations. The increasing anxiety must then be held in check by an ever-rigid self-system. For this reason, we rate Sullivan's theory as neither optimistic nor pessimistic concerning the potential for growth and change. Interpersonal relations can transform a person into either a healthy personality or one marked by anxiety and a rigid self-structure. Because Sullivan believed that personality is built solely on interpersonal relations, we rate his theory very high on social influence. Interpersonal relations are responsible for both positive and negative characteristics in people. Infants who have their needs satisfied by the mothering one will not be greatly disturbed by their mother's anxiety, will reserve genuine feelings of tenderness, can avoid being a malevolent personality, and have the ability to develop tender feelings toward others. However, unsatisfactory interpersonal relation may trigger malevolence and leave some children with the feeling that people cannot be trusted and that they are essentially alone among their enemies. So this ends my report. Hope you enjoy and learn something. Thank you.